It's Tuesday morning. If you were with us yesterday, we talked about how Jesus had walked into Jerusalem on Monday and how he had looked at a fig tree that looked like it was full of life but bared no fruit. He walked over that tree and he cursed that tree. And then, of course, he taught in the temple and drew an incredible crowd. Tuesday morning, they wake up again and they start heading back in to Jerusalem from Bethany. When they look over, they see that same fig tree, but now it's withered up and dead. The disciples point to it and say, Jesus, the fig tree. He began to teach them a lesson, and I think it's a lesson that all of us can learn. Religious activity without bearing fruit is non-productive. It's not what Jesus is looking for in our life. He's not looking for us to be religious. He's looking for us to be in relationship with Him. And if we're in relationship with Jesus, that means we bear fruit. And He's giving this tree as an example, first of all, of Israel, and how they were chosen to bless the nations, but they refused to do that. And then it speaks to us about how we're to live our life, not just attending church and memorizing Scripture, but living out the fruit of the Spirit, living the way Jesus lived. They walk on into Jerusalem and head to the temple. By now there's a huge crowd that has gathered because once again, they believe that this is the national Messiah. This is the man that's going to overthrow the Roman government. And so all the religious leaders, fearing that Rome is going to shut this down, fearing that Rome is going to take away their power is in the fact that they control the people. So they decide they've got to get rid of this Jesus. They're looking for a way to trap him, to get him to say something where he can be arrested and tried, or they can turn the people against him. And so they set some traps. The first trap they bring to him is they come and ask him, in Mark chapter 11, you read it. They want to know, how did Jesus carry out his actions the day before? Where does he get the authority to say the things he said? Where does he get the authority to do the things that he has done? And it's a trap. Well, Jesus answers by asking them a question. He says, well, I'll answer your question if you answer this one. Where did John the Baptist get his authority? Well, this put him in a dilemma because the people loved John the Baptist. He'd become a martyr. If they said that it came from God, he'd say the same is of my authority. It comes from the same place. John testified about me. If they say it was from the devil, the crowd would immediately turn on them, and that was what they feared the most. So he escaped the first trap. The second trap, who do we owe our allegiance to? They came up with a new tactic. They said, is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? Now, there were many in the crowd that wanted him to say no because they were ready for this overthrow of the government. But if he said no, the Roman authorities would step in, and that would solve the problem for the religious leaders. And so Jesus called for someone to hand a coin to him. And he took the coin in his hand and he looked at it, and he asked them another question. Whose face is on this coin? The answer is Caesar. He said, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, but render unto God what is God. A second trap avoided. Then they came at him with a religious question because there were different sects in the Jewish faith that believed differently. And so there was a group of Sadducees. The Sadducees didn't believe in an end-time resurrection. So one of them came to him and said, well, there's a man who was married to a woman and he died. And so his brother was married to her and he died. In fact, all of the brothers died. In heaven, who is going to be the husband of this woman? And Jesus just looked at him and thought, you don't know your own scriptures. Like, what are you even saying? Of course there's a resurrection. God is the God of the living, not the God of the dead. And he says, you don't understand even that. How am I going to explain to you that there's no marriage in heaven, that it's a different situation, a different setup? So trap 3. So then a young lawyer, skilled in biblical law, came to him and said, which of the commandments, remember there's 614 commandments, which of the commandments are the greatest? And this Jesus answered. He said, I can sum up all the commandments in 2. Love the Lord your God and love each other. That's it. If you follow those 2 commandments, all of the other commandments are taken care of. At this point, the religious leaders knew that they'd been outwitted and outsmarted. They knew that if they were going to try to get him during this Passover, the crowds would just rebel against them and they would lose their power. So they quietly adjourned into their secret places and decided that they have to wait till after Passover to get rid of this troublemaker they called Jesus. After a full day, many other teachings, they walked that 1.5 miles back to Bethany and spent the night.
The Lord bless you and keep you. Make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace. Lord bless you and keep you. Make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace. Amen. 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 Lord bless you and keep you. Make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace. Amen. 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 We agree. Amen. Amen.
May his favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, your family, your children, their children, their children. May his favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, your family, your children, their children, their children. Oh, may his favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family, and your children, and their children, and their children. May his favor be upon